views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us. If somebody asks, what is the Social Justice Forum? Well, a very special show, a show that provides deeper understanding into the issues and inequities that many people face, particularly in communities of color. What do we talk about? We talk about the issues. We bring things front and center. We promote a deeper discussion as well as foster civic engagement. So we encourage you to stay tuned. The Social Justice Forum starts right now. And welcome back. According to the United States Department of Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, when it comes to African American women, they have the highest rates of being overweight, also obese or compared to other groups in the United States. And so we talk about Black Girls Run. It was created in an effort to tackle the growing obesity epidemic in the African American community, as well as provide encouragement and resources to both new as well as veteran runners. Their goal, encouraging and motivating Black women to have a healthy lifestyle. Joining us to share her point of view and share a little bit more about Black Girls Run on this matter, we're talking with the owner and the CEO of Black Girls Run, Ms. J.L. Alexander, and thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, Daren, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm glad to have you sharing with us. And listen, when we talk about really your organization, it's a healthy organization, but not only is it a healthy organization, a holistic organization. So for someone that doesn't know the background about Black Girls Run, please give us a little bit of an insight.
Sure. So in a nutshell, we are just a dynamic running crew. No bias at all. But we are a movement across the country that empowers African American women. But we welcome all women to the pavement with us to get women healthy and active. And through community, through the idea of community and accountability, building sisterhood, we want women to just get healthy and active to really make this lifestyle a priority, to really make our community, a Black community, our female community, to make us healthy, just as healthy as possible. And so we do that through the sport of running, but we do a lot of other things as well. But it's definitely, like you said, a holistic approach. As much as we talk about physical activity, we also talk about nutrition. We also talk about self-care, things to take care of the entire body, not just getting our feet on the pavement. So it really is a movement that we just talk about health and fitness as a whole.
Yeah. When we talk about health and fitness, obviously becoming healthy, making the choice to do fitness, it sometimes is a strenuous thought just to get into the practice of doing
Absolutely.
it. But I know that you talk about partnerships and women helping women. So give us a little bit about how the ladies encourage each other, these women encourage each other to get to the place of running, no matter where it is. Like, you know, if you're just starting, you still got some help and you have a community that actually supports you.
Absolutely. So we call it healthy peer pressure. We can definitely guarantee 9 times out of 10, once you make the hardest step, which is usually the first step of mentally getting ready to head out the front door or lace up those shoes, once you get past that hurdle and you come out to a BGR meetup or meeting with your BGR partner or coming out for the first time with a BGR group, we know you will feel the BGR energy, that spirit of sisterhood, that no woman will be left behind. We meet you where you are on the pavement, whether you are walking your first mile or whether you've been running for years and now trying to sustain a healthy lifestyle. Wherever you are in your journey, we want to meet you there and make sure we hold your hand and hold you accountable to become healthier and more active. Like we said, no woman is left behind. Everyone's journey is completely different, but we know that once you get pulled into this great peer pressure of getting healthy and active and being surrounded by like-minded women that look like you. We've created safe spaces for you to come where you won't feel intimidated, that it's healthy competition. We know that you'll stick with us for the long run. I can guarantee it.
So when you talk about that supportive space, I mean, that's a place and space that many people really desire, because when you're trying to get this going and you're trying to get to the next level, or just even trying to get out the door, doing it by yourself is not always the best practice. So talk to us about that supportive space and what that really has meant in the lives of some of these women.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we hear it all the time. We go through, I wasn't a runner all my life. I wasn't physically active all my life. But when I got paired up with Black Girls Run, and I knew that I had a group of women that would be waiting on me Tuesday morning at 6 a.m., I knew I needed to get up. I needed to get my clothes on, and I needed to get out there to be them, because it was respectable, and be respectful of their time, that we were making this commitment to each other, but also that I needed to hold myself accountable, and that they were holding me accountable as well. So as much as we talk about community and sisterhood, it's an accountability factor, that you have someone meeting you, that it's a little bit easier when you have a partner and someone to cheer you on and encourage you. So I think doing it together, and obviously the current climate that we're in of social distancing, the idea of community is probably more important ever than now, because it's very easy to say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, or let's just start on Monday. Monday sounds good. And then it becomes the following week. And before you know it, a few months have rolled past. So if you can get around a community, like I said, that's very like-minded, that we've created a space for you to come in, for you to just get going, but that you'll be surrounded by people that want to see you succeed. I think that's what helps people to kind of keep pushing through the process.
So you're in 34 cities and you're across the nation. Talk about some of the places and the spaces that you're actually in.
Yeah, so we have 74 cities. We're located in about 35 states across the country. We have about 250,000 members across the country. But we have women from anywhere from Los Angeles and Fresno, California, up to Boston and down to Miami, Houston, any major city that you can probably think of. We have some type of presence there in terms of groups. We have about 190 ambassadors that lead these dynamic groups across the country, and another few hundred run coordinators. These are the women that are out meeting you at a 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning to do 3 and 4 miles. So we have a infrastructure, if you will, of dynamic women that are ready to be on the pavement with you.
Walk us through, for an average person who takes part, say if, my sister decides to join and she now becomes a part, how does it work? And walk us through what a typical possible run would look like.
Yeah, so she'll go to the website, blackgirlsrun.com. Let's say she lives in Boston. Mm-hmm. And we'll say, hey, you can join the Boston group. She'll link up virtually with our 2 ambassadors there, Tiffany and Katanya. And they'll say, hey, we have a Tuesday run at this recreation center. We meet at 6 a.m. Come on out with us. Obviously, in COVID-19 days, we have a waiver for you to sign. You'll come out. We're taking temperatures right now, obviously, because that's the state that we're in. So very unique times. But she'll come out, make sure that she feels good, that she feels healthy before she comes out. And then she come out for a run. We'll explain the route. We'll do a few stretches. And then people head off on their route. And everyone waits until the last person comes in. So sometimes we have a couple of routes depending on the level of activity, or if you're a walker, sometimes we do a 20-minute in, 20-minute out. So wherever you end up at 20 minutes, you turn around and just come back to the start. And then we try to do, we do like a kind of like a parade, if you will, at the end, where people are just a shoot for you to come back in to celebrate that you're finished. So it's always encouraging people. But yeah, it's just kind of your typical meetup run. Nothing special about it. It's just a whole bunch of dynamic, beautiful women just getting on the pavement to run with each other.
What made it special for you? Because you said you weren't always a runner, right? And right. This was what you normally do. Yeah. What was the selling point for you to get you in to say, I'm in?
Well, I actually started running on my own. I hit a heavy weight after grad school. It's been about 10 years ago that I started running. And I always did group sports. I was an athlete for most of my life. And then after college, just didn't know how to process being an adult, and was eating whatever, and weight was coming on faster than it was losing. And so I was like, all right, I need to do something. And then I had a short stint where I was like 23 years old and dealing with high blood pressure. And my doctor was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, high blood pressure and 23 years old, they just don't go together. You need to change your diet. You need to change your physical activity level. And so I started running on my own. I just signed up for a 10K locally here in Richmond. And then I got paired with BGR actually through my professional expertise, through marketing and PR, and then just got welcomed into the community and just fell in love with running. But it was really the women around me that just really motivated me. I was meeting women that were older than me, that were running half marathons and marathons. Bodies looked like they were 23 years old. And I was like, I need to be a part of this. Whatever Kool-Aid they're drinking, I want to drink it. And so it was really that welcoming community. They were teaching me things that I had just not been exposed to in my life outside of being just a basketball player. And now this whole running world was something completely new to me. And it was welcoming how to eat healthy, but also like the things that you eat, or how to, people were doing yoga and they were also running, and then signing up for marathons. And then people were traveling and doing runcations. I was like, what is this? And so it was a whole new world.
Right.
And I immediately got pulled into it, and I have met some of my best girlfriends that I'm still running with to this day.
Well, you've got this great sisterhood going, right? So you start running, you get the sisterhood going, you're out there, you're meeting people across the nation. And at the same time, you're also doing something healthy and holistic, where you're really dealing with the issue of obesity. And when you look at the numbers, and you look at the numbers, particularly when it comes to African-American women, we lose a lot to high blood pressure, lose a lot to obesity. What's it feel like for you being able to offer this healthy alternative to sisters and really help them in the struggle?
Yeah, we are offering just what you said. We're offering a solution to the problem. Very often people say, well, I can't run, or I can barely do this. And so we want to give them, well, the why not? Like, why can't you do this? We have 250,000 women a part of this organization, all shapes, all sizes, all ages, that are doing it. So why can't you be a part of it? And it empowers me as the owner and CEO, but it empowers our entire organization, women across our organization, to see women that are out here that are not your traditional runner model. There's curvy women, there's all shapes, all sizes, women that are actually out here running and hit the pavement. And so it empowers us that we're actually able to move the needle to get our communities healthy and active, because as women, as we become healthy and active, we know that those activities will translate into our families and to the next generation to be healthy and active as well.
Yeah, I want to give our viewers an opportunity to take a look at some statistics. When it talks about African-American women, they actually have the highest rates of being overweight or obese compared to other groups in the United States. About 4 out of 5 African-American women are overweight or obese. And in 2015, African-Americans were 1.4 times as likely to be obese as non-Hispanic whites. And then in 2015, African-American women were 60% more likely to be obese than non-Hispanic white women. And then the key statistic, in 2011 to 2014, African-American girls were 50% more likely to be overweight than non-Hispanic white girls. And so let me ask about these numbers that I just threw out there. What have you found from just your work and having boots on the ground? What do we have that supports why these numbers are the way they are?
I mean, there's a lot of things that, I mean, obviously the state that we're in, you can start peeling back the layers, and it's a lot of systemic racism issues that are there. You know, having access to healthy foods, generationalized welfare, you know, having sections of our communities where they can't get to a grocery store that's not on a public transportation access line, or they can't walk to a farmer's market, or they don't even have walkable sidewalks to begin with. So there's a lot of issues as you start peeling it back. I mean, just culturally as a people, you know, we over funerals and weddings and baby showers, and we like cooking, and we like fellowshipping, and we do a lot of that over food. But even on a flip side, we even talk about hair. This new natural hair phenomenon is something very recent. You know, Black women, we were spending a lot of money on getting our hair pressed and weaves and things of that nature. And if you catch me on a straight day, you will not see me running. So, and that's a very real statement. You know, we spent hours at the hair salon, but we were putting our beauty before our health. And now I think those conversations have started to change, that now that we see, okay, things that we've been doing historically, they aren't working for us. For some reason, Black women are at the top of the charts for cancer and high blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease. So we need to do something to change it up. So obviously the natural hair phenomenon has allowed us to really color outside those lines, if you will. You know, and we've been able to be advocates in communities for, you know, where we need to get streets paved, or we need to have safety in terms of, you know, lighting at night to make sure that women and communities feel safe just to go outside to run. But then also just the creation of groups like Black Girls Run. We need to make sure that we have spaces for women to come together, that they feel welcome, that they feel encouraged. Very often we get the question of, why Black Girls Run? Why isn't it all girls run? Or don't you all consider yourself racist? You wouldn't believe the comments that I get on a regular basis. And it's the same thing. We wouldn't have to say that Black girls run. We wouldn't have to say that. We wouldn't have to say all, you know, Black girls run if it was welcoming to everyone. So we're very fortunate be in a space that we're starting to get more and more women just to become more healthy and more healthier and more active. But those numbers, you know, they underscore the need for us and why this movement absolutely continues.
A powerful, powerful movement. And thank you so much for the great work that you guys are doing in terms of really, like, you know, shaping people and helping people to be healthy, as well as the holistic. And so before we go, tell people how they get connected, if they want to run, or if they want to find out what's in their neighborhood.
Yes, please. Head to our website, blackgirlsrun.com. We have all 74 groups listed there. I can guarantee there's a group there in your community. Obviously, with the pandemic happening right now, a lot of virtual challenges, but we still want to welcome you into our community and still get you started on the right step. And then join us and follow us on all of our social media fronts, just to stay connected with Black Girls Run. And we look forward to seeing everyone at a race and on the pavement very soon.
JL Alexander, thank you so much for being with us, talking about Black Girls Run, as our sisters are taking it to another level. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. We've got more show. We want you to stay with us. Don't go anywhere. The Social Justice Forum is coming up right after this.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scale of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people.
people, it's gonna go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting for BronxNet, this is Marsha.
Welcome back. African Americans struggle to be represented in media, much due to the racism as well as the negative stereotypes that are associated with people of color. The Wakeman Agency created the Narrative Justice Project as a response to the continual misrepresentation in communities of color and the underrepresentation of people, as well as their goal now to bring equality in the area of media representation, ensuring the inclusion of diverse voices from across communities of color. We're pleased to be joined now, providing their point of view on this matter, by the founder of the Wakeman Agency, Vanessa Wakeman, and she now joins us here on the Social Justice Forums. And Vanessa, good to have you.
Good morning, Daren. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it's an important conversation when we talk about the narrative that's actually being portrayed, stereotypes of, particularly in communities of color. And for you, as I asked you before, you've been doing this for like 17 years. So talk to us about really what drove you to forming your own agency and doing what you do.
Well, so that's a great question. I worked the early part of my career in corporate America and was very confident and sure that I would remain in those environments. But I had a number of experiences that made me question if there was a space for me to be able to show up as my full self and to really be happy in those spaces. And so when I think back, a lot of my sort of perseverance was one, trying to prove people wrong all the time. Like, as a Black woman, I can do these things. As a Black woman, I can excel. As a Black woman, I can make this money. And so finally sort of feeling exhausted and deflated in many ways after just, continually try, even though I did have success, I decided that I wanted to sort of put my fate in my own hands. And so I opened the agency in 2003 and sort of haven't looked back.
Right. Talk to me about doing what you do, because when you're talking about the underrepresentation in communities of color, particularly in mainstream media, it is a huge gap that must be filled. And secondly, it's also some great work that has to be done in terms of leveling the playing field. So talk about what your work has done in terms of trying to even level the playing field, and not even just level the playing field, but take it beyond leveling.
Yes, so the agency works primarily with nonprofit organizations on a number of social issues, and a lot of these issues impact Black and Brown people. So whether that be education, poverty, women's reproductive rights, like sort of the entire spectrum of like, what are we trying to fix in this country, and how do those sort of issues disproportionately affect people of color? We've done a lot of work sort of trying to elevate the needs and the voices of people of color throughout the trajectory of the organization. I found that often when we are able to get, media stories out or to allow people's voices to be heard, there is sometimes an interest in sort of a one-sided portrayal, or sometimes, this is not my term, but I love it, and so I use it often, sort of holding up the poverty porn. So give me your saddest, worst case scenario, like what life could be like this poor person. And that's not how I want us to be portrayed. And that's not how we want to be portrayed. We want to sort of be the full breadth, the multi-dimensional human being that each of us is, should be able to be seen and heard clearly, not just sort of this sort of stereotype of what we should be. And so really trying to make sure that people's voices are heard and that it's an honest, authentic portrayal. And so understanding like some of what I've seen throughout our work with PR, and also seeing like where stories aren't being told. For the indigenous community, for example, oftentimes their stories don't even make it into the media. There has been a number of violent acts against Indigenous women that we never see in the media. So really trying to create the resources that people in various communities of Black and Brown people can leverage to make sure that if an incident happens, if there's a crisis, if they're a witness to something, if it happens to their family or a neighbor, that they now understand how to navigate the media and in some ways control the narrative.
And talk about narrative, you've got what's called the Narrative Justice Project. And so that is a very detail-oriented project, and it's a very intentional project. Give our viewers some insight into what the Narrative Justice Project really is all about.
Yes, so the Narrative Justice Project, it's our baby. It is a free training program for communities of color. And the training is really to help people understand how to engage the media if there is an issue. So if there's something happening in the community, as I mentioned, if there's an act of violence, a police brutality, if the media comes to your community and wants to interview you, how do you make sure that you are getting the points across that are important to share, whether it be about a person or the environment or sort of your particular stance. And so the training was originally envisioned as a 2.5-hour in-person offering. And our goal was to go in 2020 to 20 cities around the country. When COVID hit, we knew that wouldn't be possible, but we also knew that the sort of need for the training still existed. And so we were able to transition the training from a 2.5-hour online to a 90-minute, online offering where people can sign up, register for the training, and then they are guided through the different elements of interacting with the media. So we've been doing the training for a couple of months now. I think we're in month 2 of the online, and it's been really interesting to hear people's reasons for taking the training, just so I'm wanting to sort of be better informed. So that we have a interesting mix of people who are activists in their own right, who are saying, hey, I know this when we're out protesting or when this thing is happening in my community, that the media is coming to me, and I want to make sure that I'm able to tell my story to the best of my ability. And then we have people who are not on the front lines or who are not doing that, but want to be informed just in case something happens, just in case something happens to their community, just in case something happens to a family member. And so it's an interesting mix of people who are really excited about the opportunity to get this information and engage and understand how they can claim their power in this way.
And when we talk about claiming power, it's obviously, it comes when you have the ability to tell your story and create your own narrative. And I know that's exactly what we're talking about, how we oftentimes don't get to get the narrative told. Someone else tells our story for us, or they omit something that's very key, or not even having a sensitivity or knowledge as to what's going on in our very own communities. So when you're coaching and when you're sharing this information, what are some of the key things that you want to pass on to people about being able to control the narrative, and at the same time, not just control the narrative, but also be able to drive the issue home?
Sure. So one of the things that we talk about that I think is really important is really not getting caught up in what the other person is trying to get from you, but being clear on what you want to communicate. And so any sort of media interaction, a reporter or journalist is going to ask you specific questions, but there are ways to sort of frame your responses in a way that you're getting out the information that is important to you. For them to sort of feel proud and excited about the opportunity to share the story, and to like not feel like they are inferior in any way in the interaction, like, oh, if I don't do what the media, what the journalist wants me to do, or if I don't answer in a certain way, then it's bad. Sort of show up as yourselves, and not to sort of look for the perfect conditions of it, like, oh, I didn't have on the right clothing, or I maybe didn't say this in as sophisticated way as I wish I had. Just sort of giving an honest portrayal of what the situation is, but focusing on the points and remembering that you get to control what the words that come out of your mouth. And so being really clear around the information that you have to share. And being thoughtful, sort of, not in every instance can you prepare for an interview. Maybe, you're sort of thrust in front of the camera, but in those instances when you have an opportunity to prepare, think about what you want to say and what the message is that you want to get across.
What are the common mistakes that people are making during this time of the season, particularly when it comes to media? I often think, that social media has been the downfall. And while it's a great blessing, don't get me wrong. I mean, we live for social media. We're on social media, but in many ways, it's a blessing and it's also a curse. It's been the downfall for a lot of people who have just made the wrong mistake, said the wrong thing, done the wrong thing. What are some of the common mistakes that people make regarding social media that maybe we better think twice about this one?
So one of the things that I see most often is the lack of verification for information. So the part of the curse that you mentioned about social media is the ability for anybody to put anything out. Like, oh, Vanessa, got a chain. She used to be, a Siamese cat, right? And so somebody pushes that out. She had surgery and she's no longer a cat. She's sort of showing up as a human. And somebody sort of sees that and shares it, and it sort of takes on a life of its own. So sometimes we don't verify information, and then that sort of causes a sort of domino effect of pushback. So one thing is making sure that the information that you're sharing is verified and that it is true and it is authentic. The other thing is the social media takes away the sort of discipline, or it gives a lot of people courage. Let me say it that way. So things that you normally wouldn't say to someone's face or in an in-person interaction, people sort of feel at liberty, like, oh yeah, I could just write anything. So there's a different kind of accountability. And I find that also causes a lot of issues where people are just putting anything out and then later saying oh, maybe I should have thought about that. And so we tell people, is this a comment that you want to be seen, a day later? Is this going to come back and haunt you? It's, sort of being witty and smart and sort of having a great command of, language and loving words is one thing, and that's beautiful. Sort of often, being too fast, trigger fingers, and not being really thoughtful about what are the repercussions of the impact of this statement? Is this going to come back to harm me? I think if people would just sort of do that due diligence up front and sort of manage themselves better, that could be helpful in solving some of those issues.
Yeah. And when we look at media, obviously one of the things that we often say is there is this lack of color. There's a lack of people of color. In my industry alone, we know that journalism has been long dominated by whites. To see an African American, I remember, what got me into this was watching, and I'm dating myself now, right? But to see me as a young boy, what I was able to see is Max Robinson on ABC News, and it was one of the very rare visions I had of an African American in front of a camera. And to this day, from Max Robinson all the way up until present day, while there have been progressive changes in media, there still seems to be that lack of diversity. And when we talk about CNN, even though it's considered the worldwide leader in news, is now also being challenged for the amount of minorities that are actually on their station. So talk to us a little bit about the misrepresentation or the underrepresentation of communities of color in journalism, and what you feel that does in a wider context.
Right.
Wider, W-I-D-E-R.
The challenge with having such a lack of diversity in media environments is that the framing of the story, the way that stories are told, typically do not accurately represent the people that the story is being told about. So even for the most, liberal journalist, the one that's most interested in getting it right, there are just certain nuances about the Black experience or the Latinx experience or the Indigenous experience that just doesn't translate. I know there's a couple of organizations I know internationally that focus on training women from different communities to sort of be the journalists for those communities. And the way the stories are told are so beautiful in that they represent the people. So they understand, like, who are the elders? What is the culture? What are the challenges? How do we fix it? And that's a very different approach to journalism than how we do it here in the US. And so I have seen instances where people or organizations are trying to take corrective measures, but it feels like it's moving too slow. And the problem with that is that, like, what is the harm being done? We know that the media, the way the stories are told, absolutely create the perception for the community at large, for people in the country of all ethnicities, sort of how they see different people. And so if those stories are only told from this sort of like one slant, this one angle, then it creates these sort of perceptions around, like, oh, this is what Black people typically do. Oh, of course I knew it would be a Black person when they sort of gave the trailer for this. And so really trying to make sure that there is representation of the storytellers, so that people really get to see and understand and learn from the media. Like, I think we get information from the media about, like, this is breaking news or this thing is happening, but I can't say that in recent years my experience has been like, wow, I learned something about people in a certain part of the world or part of the country. I don't think that reflection of the humanity is represented in the way the stories are told that is really helpful to advancing, like, mankind. And so I think that that's something that would really be shaped if we had more diversity in newsrooms.
I think what we say is, things have gotten more subjective rather than being objective. And when we grew up, media was always, supposed to be taught to be objective, but rather now what we're seeing is a lot of subjectivity, a lot of people giving their opinion. And as you said, some of this opinion is not based on fact, it's just based on opinion. And there's a lot of, hype and not a lot of substance, as we can say. But as we bring this kind of close to a close, I want to get your perspective on where do we go from here and the role that you're playing in trying to continue to improve things. Because as we know, there's a lot of great work that's going on in social justice with regards to changing the narrative. And so for yourself, what do you have coming up in the future that could actually, that lends itself along those lines?
Sure. So our hope is to continue this project for as long as we need to, so that we have some concentration of people in different communities and different cities that feel that they can interact, very, fluently with the media and be able to help tell stories. As part of the project, the University of Florida, their College of Journalism and Communications, graciously and generously offered a research resources to us to be able to sort of collect do focus groups and surveys as part of the training to sort of understand the perceptions of media from the people who are participating. And so what we hope to do is be able to take that information to different news organizations, maybe once we're a year in, and say, hey, here's some of what we're hearing and here's some of the thinking. And so an example of that is I think 2 weeks ago at a training, someone said that she does not trust mainstream media while she knows that they have sort of access to give more information and a wider breadth of coverage, that she just didn't trust it, and she prefers and relies on community resources. And sometimes they are slower to get the information or may not be as comprehensive. And so really trying to help the media understand like some of like what they're losing as far as like, I know market share is so important, like who is listening and watching and sort of paying attention to what's happening, and hoping that that could be part of a conversation about what kind of changes can be made. The other thing is how how do people get to report on stories? So let's say if a reporter of color does have an opportunity to do a story, who is editing that? Are they cutting out, information that is important to the story and the framing? Is the producer sort of committing to sort of getting diverse voices and diverse opinions? So there's a number of layers. When we talk about representation, it's not just sort of who's doing the reporting, but what are the supporting characters in this process that make sure that everyone's voice is heard? So I hope that some of what we're doing will help to lend itself to that process. And then organizations just have to make a commitment. Like if you are really interested in your journalistic integrity, sort of like the vow or the pledge, then this is an important part of that.
Right. Vanessa, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much. Vanessa Wakeman of the Wakeman Agency. Great work. And as we say, thank you so much for helping to shape that narrative and change the narrative, because it's much needed in a time such as this. And, 17 years doing this, it's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Listen, thank you. And listen, we got to take a quick break. We've got more on the social justice forums. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Be back in a few.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
It looks bleak. It feels bleak. But the city isn't shut down because our public services keep working. In spite of, and in the face of, the dangers, we can count on them. And to keep them working and funded now and in the future, we need to be counted. Self-respond now to the 2020 census at my2020census.gov.
And welcome back. The Brotherhood Sister Soul is a social justice youth development organization that actually focuses on issues such as youth leadership development, educational achievement, social justice, and so much more. The organization provides greater opportunities for youth members to have economic security, as well as healthy minds, bodies, and spirits, as well as academic success and lives that inspire others. The Brotherhood Sister Soul has been involved in campaigns to fix PS 186, as well as reforming stop and frisk, as well as closing Rikers, pass the MTA, and increase the student support staff via the 2020 campaign. And so here to share a little bit more about Brotherhood Sister Soul, give us further insight, is the lead organizer and Liberation Program Facilitator for Brotherhood Sister Soul, Marsha Jean Charles, and then also another member of Brother Sister Soul's Liberation Program, Maya Fortuna. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us. Happy to talk through whatever you want to talk through.
Yeah, we're glad to have you talking and sharing with us. And so when we talk about your programs, you got a lot of great things that are going on. And for people who don't know about the Liberation Program, a program that's geared towards, helping people be liberated, give us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Liberation Program is a youth organizing, youth activism program. It's youth guided, and by way of various summer programs and different aspects of the program, we have around 30-something young people who are working to affect change in their communities. And our current campaign, you already named the 2020 campaign, is specifically around increasing the numbers, or the budget rather, for New York City public schools. So it's to hire student support staff, including guidance counselors, coordinate or college counselors, social workers, etc., and to end the school to prison pipeline and policing culture overall in New York City public schools.
Maya, you're a member of the group, and talk to us about your participation and what you feel the group actually brings to you.
The group is like a second family to me. It's when I'm in an LP, I'm there to actually, it's fun, and I don't see it as a job or like a burden. It's something I enjoy to do and love to be in.
And so when you talk about what you actually do, so for somebody who doesn't know what you do as being a part of the group, Maya, give us a little bit about what you do.
Well, as an LP member, I have lobbied in Albany for our 2020 campaign, participated in exhibits for that same campaign, attended rallies, which I speak on, to, again, get more visibility for our campaign and speak about the defunding the NYPD and to get more student support staff in our schools.
Mm-hmm. So Marsha, as a young person being engaged in activism at an early age, it's very key and it's very crucial. When we think of a lot of the great civil rights leaders, those who've been involved in activism before, all got their start pretty much at a young age. So what does it mean for you being a youth activist and a leading youth activist and helping people become so entrenched in society that needs this kind of assistance and this kind of voice, given the climate that we're in?
Yeah, I think the climate that we're in is integral to our future success as a city. And I think it's so obvious that young people are leading a lot of the efforts to defund the NYPD or just to bring voice to issues that our communities face. I am an alumna of the Liberation Program. I was a member when I was in high school and went off to college and graduate school and came back. And so for me, it's also like coming home, and Maya mentioned like the family feel of Bro Sis or the Brotherhood Sister Soul. And with Liberation Program in particular, I get to actualize my politics. I get to support young people in affecting change in ways that I also support. And I also get to be a part of the legacy, the 25-year-long legacy of organizing and racial justice work at the Brotherhood Sister Soul. And so I think we are wrong to believe that the youth are the future. Youth are the today. They're the leaders now. They're affecting change now in a variety of ways. And in the Liberation Program, we do it by way of consensus, by way of our campaign. And at Bro Sis, we also do it through efforts of like campaign and also trying to amend the varied ways that young people are criminalized in New York City. And by amend, I mean end and abolish. And so we're doing that in a variety of ways, and the Liberation Program is definitely a key and integral part to that larger vision for the future of New York City.
When you talk about some of the things that you're really passionate about, I heard both of you talk about one of the things in your organization is defund the police. Some people say it's the wrong thing to do, but for you guys have really been very vocal about defunding the police. I'll start with Maya. So give us a case for why you feel the police should be defunded.
I think the police should be defunded because they're not trained, and they're not trained to be in our schools, and to have them have more money than our schools is just incorrect because some schools are underfunded, which means that they're missing student support staff, which includes guidance counselors, career counselors, social workers, therapists, and college counselors, which is really needed.
I think the question, when people get nervous around defunding the police, and I remember another organizer, Bob Ganji, we had a meeting with him during our summer programming, and he offered like important insight, and it's something that I'm going to bring to this conversation. I think the question should be, do you want to fund police more than you want to fund schools? Do you want to fund police more than you want to fund equitable housing? Do you want to fund police more than you want to fund food security in your community? And that's really how we look at it. We look at it as of right now in COVID-19, there is a limited supply of resources, and we have to use those resources to better our communities. And the more we fund the people terrorizing our communities, the less we can fund actual community success. The less we can fund the needs of the very people in our communities, the less we can fund the things that make our community better. And so it's not necessarily about divesting from the police to divest from the police. It's about ending police brutality, of course, and always, but it's also about investing in our communities and making our communities better. And we have to take it from somewhere. And so let's take it from the people who have never really been charged with doing so.
I want to talk about another program that you guys are really dealing with. It's the MRTA program. And for people who don't know what MRTA stands for, certainly it's the Marijuana Regulation and Tax Action Act. So for someone who doesn't know about that, talk about your work with that program.
Yeah, so the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act is actually a bill put forward by a number of communities, and we are working in collaboration with the Drug Policy Alliance and a variety of organizations working to legalize recreational use of marijuana for adults. And the act itself is a bill that's been on our state elected floor for some time. And I know most recently they, voted to further decriminalization, but marijuana has been decriminalized in New York City since 1977, and yet people were getting arrested in large part. And the recent decriminalization bill of last year it supported a lot of the things that we wanted, but it didn't actually legalize marijuana, and therefore it didn't really decriminalize our communities. Because the reality is that it's not about the drug, it's about who's using it. And we find time and again that our people, Black and brown people, Black and Latinx people in particular, are getting criminalized for things that are decriminalized in other parts of the state or in other parts of the country. And we are getting targeted by over-policing and various things of that nature. And by that, we are getting put into prison in large numbers, right? And so the fact of the matter is that marijuana use is one of the things that our communities go to jail for, and we all know that our communities are not used any more than any other. And so the best way to actually secure our communities and also to bring back funding for our communities is to pass the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. And I would love for people to talk about that more, so thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for those who are going to call their senators and assembly folks in Albany and ask them to pass the MRTA, because it's long overdue, and it's definitely something we need to do now.
I'm gonna bring Maya back in as we talk a little bit more about some of the programs that you're actually dealing with and trying to seek legislation to. And the 2020 Act, I know that the 2020 campaign, you've got some demands that you've actually made. So Maya, for people who want to know a little bit about the demands in your 2020 Act, talk to us about that and what you want to see happen.
For the 2020 campaigns, our demands just focuses on making sure that students have those student support staff and not being criminalized as students. Like one of our disciplinary demands was to remove metal detectors, because as students walk into schools with metal detectors, it's more like you're criminalizing and assuming that students have something on them that they shouldn't be, although they don't, because the items that are collected at the metal detector are just hair picks, phones, and other things that aren't really weapons that would really hurt someone.
Mm-hmm. And so as we talk a little bit about, this particular disciplinary changes, talk about programmatic changes, Marsha, give me a little bit about this here, because I know one of the things that you talked about in the programmatic changes that you like to see is the incentivizing and crafting programs for graduates of color to become counselors and then also therapists. Why is this important?
when we think about what our communities need, and when we think about specifically mental health in communities of youth and specifically youth of color, we know that our young people are navigating the very things that we're navigating without many of the supports that we may or may not have. And we also know that schools are places where they are for innumerable hours of the day, and they spend a lot of time in school. And if we really want to support young people, we're going to put mental health supports in school. And so the fact too is that there's an issue of the pipeline, like who's going to schools for social work, who's going to schools for guidance counseling and such. And so the reality is that we also need more people of color to do that. We need more young people to see themselves in the support staff that are there to help them succeed, so that they feel comfortable sharing the very things that they're going through and seeking support with those things. And so to do that effectively, we not only need more student support staff, but we also need more student support staff of color, and principally guidance counselors, career counselors, and therapists of color who are not only trained in the very professional ways that they're trained, but who also understand the context in which they live and the context in which many of our young people live, so as to holistically be able to support them.
Mm-hmm. So Maya, for somebody who's saying, listen, why should I be involved in these issues at an early age? And you guys are doing a great job in terms of really a fantastic job in bringing the issues forward from a young person's perspective. But talk to us about why it's important for young people to be active in these issues that are really hitting our society every day.
I think it's important because, as Marsha, we are today and not the future, because we are the one experiencing how the city is being ran and how our schools are being ran. So we should have a voice in what's going on and how things should change, because we have stories and experiences to tell.
Yeah, I can echo Maya, but the reality is that young people are paying attention. Young people are experiencing the realities that we face. Young people should always have a seat at the table, especially when deciding things that matter to their very lives and livelihoods. And so our city has a number of young people. There's a statistic that like 1 in every 331 Americans is a New York City public school student. That's a lot of Americans, and we have 1.1 million New York City public school students. That's a lot of New Yorkers. And so they should always be a part of the decision making, and they should always have the power to interject where needed. And quite honestly, it's always needed. Like youth vision, youth insight, youth innovation are key parts of our city and parts of our lives, and have always been key parts of social justice movements. So it's more of a question of like, why not? Like, why don't you have more young people on your decision-making bodies? And why don't you have more youth voice in the very places that you inhabit?
So let's get connected on how now people get connected to you. So if people are saying, listen, this is great, youth activism, I could be a youth leader, I could be connected to an organization that's doing some great positive things. What do people do to get connected to Brotherhood Sister Soul?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you want to do. We're always happy to support volunteers who want to support us, and we're always happy to find ways to work together and work collaboratively. I think the easiest thing you can do is follow us on social, Brosis512 on Twitter and Instagram, or Brotherhood Sister Soul on Facebook. I think we publish so many things there and post so many things there that it's easy to figure out which one you want to tap into and which one you want to engage with. I think most recently, if you want to hear more about youth voices and youth vision for New York City, you can definitely go on Facebook. There was a youth town hall mid last week, and so you'll hear more from young people about what they want to see. But I think social media is the easiest way, and if you're more into email, then definitely email us at info@brotherhood-sistersoul.org, and the person who responds to that will direct your email wherever they need to go.
All righty. Well, Marsha and Maya, we got to leave it there. But thank you so much for coming and sharing with us on the Social Justice Forums. Good to hear your voices, and great, fantastic work that you're doing in terms of being a voice for the voiceless and advocating in Albany, across New York State. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing with us here on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you for having us. It's been live.
Thank you. Well, listen, I want to let you know that we have come to the end of our show today. I want to thank our guests. We hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forums. And listen, if you want to re-watch this week's episode, all you have to do is catch the Recablecast. The Recablecast will actually be on BronxNet TV or BronxNet.org. And if you want to join us in the conversation, and you always are welcome to present your point of view, what you can do is always go to our social media pages at BronxNet TV. Join us next week as we continue to elevate the discussion and the awareness when it comes to social justice issues. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care, God bless. We'll catch you next week.